Alright, welcome back. Now we are on the final step of creating our value stream map, which is adding in our timeline. So we want to add a timeline below our process steps to show how long does it take to go from the start of our process, receiving coils, all the way on through to shipping final product to our customer. And to illustrate that, we're going to be putting in a timeline below our process steps. Now up here in the palette is the timeline palette. And under the timeline palette, you've got a couple of icons here. And the first one we're going to be working with is the timeline icon. So you can just grab this little icon and drag it out here down below our process steps. And then we're just going to zoom in down here below our process steps. And what we're going to want to illustrate is the amount of time it takes for product to go from one step to the next. And so we're going to have a couple different things going on here. We're going to have material sitting in steps waiting for the processing, and then also being processed within a process step. So that's what the little broken line here shows, is that we have a certain amount of time material is going to be sitting in inventory waiting to be processed, and then we're going to have a certain amount of time that it's actually going to be processed. So now we just need to create this timeline along our bottom and fill in the blanks with the cycle times. And so to do that, we're just simply going to type in here, we know we've got 5 days worth of coils. So it takes 5 days for all these coils to get consumed into this process. We've got 5 days worth of inventory here. We know in our stamping process here we have 1 second of cycle time. So we're just going to simply type in here 1 second. And now I'm just going to simply get this lined up underneath our process step here in our inventory step, and we do that just by grabbing these little dots here to make sure where everything's lined up. And so now we've got 5 days sitting in inventory, we've got 1 second of actual cycle time, and now we're going to move on to our next step, which is inventory between stamping and welding station number one. And to just continue our timeline, we just simply come down here and we're going to get this little plus icon, and we click the plus, and now we've got a little bit more timeline that we can draw on. We're going to grab our little dot here, drag this over, and in this particular step we have 7.6 days where material sits between stamping and welding station number 2. And we're going to continue our timeline again here. Click on the plus, grab our little dot, drag this over. And here we know our cycle time is 39 seconds, so we can fill that in, 39 seconds. All right, and then we're going to continue our timeline again. Oop. Grab the dot on the end here, drag this over to our next step. In between welding station 1 and 2, we have 1.8 days of material. You can move this over. Now we want to add on to that timeline again. Here we have a cycle time of 46 seconds. For welding station number 2. And in between our welding number 2 and assembly number 1, we have 2.7 days. 2.7 days waiting there. Assembly number 1 takes 62 seconds. So we're going to move over a little bit further here. Okay, now in between assembly number 1 and assembly number 2, we have inventory, some material. And between those two stations, assembly 1 and 2, we have 2 days worth of material there. And assembly number 2 is a 40-second cycle time. And then finally, our last step here, or our last bit of inventory before we actually ship product, it's going to be sitting for 4.5 days. So now if we look at, we zoom out on our timeline here, you can see that 5 days of coils in front of stamping, a second to do the stamping process, 7.6 days of wait time in between stamping and welding 1, 39 seconds cycle time there, etc., all the way through this process. So now the last step in creating our timeline is just simply summing up our production lead time, which is the time we have sitting in between each of the steps, and our actual processing time, which is the actual time it takes to do the value added work. And to illustrate that, up here in the time flow palette, we have this icon, which we can bring in here and put at the end of our cycle time, or end of our timeline. So let's just go ahead and zoom in on this. And so the lead time is just going to be adding up 4.5 days, 2 days, etc. That's going to add up to, in our example, 23.6 days. And the actual processing time is the time that it's going to actually take to do each of the steps, which in our example is 188 seconds. And so now we have our complete value stream map showing all of the process steps, information flow, material flow, and our timeline. So that's it. That's the last step in creating the value stream map.